Good morning, everyone. Happy Easter and Hag Miak. Easter and Passover greetings. I am Reverend Patricia Guthman Haresh, minister of the First Unitarian Congregation of Ottawa. You can call me Pat. Although the doors to our building are closed to do our part in preventing the spread of disease, we still are a vibrant congregation with open minds, spirit, and hearts. Whatever your heritage, whatever your faith, whomever you love, and however you identify, today you are a part of our community. These days, this room is a sanctuary, a dining room, a conference room, a workplace, and a virtual classroom. This morning I welcome you into my home, and you are listening to music and hearing music from Deirdre Kellerman's home, our music director. Thank you for welcoming us into your home. It's a beautiful thing to think that even though we are in separate places, protecting ourselves and others by staying away from a crowd, here we are together online, listening, connecting, and soon singing songs together. I hope this moment finds you well. A few announcements. As I've mentioned before, while the building is closed, staff are working remotely and won't be regularly in the office, only as necessary. From home, they will be monitoring emails as they would during the usual work week. Phone calls will not be checked very often at all, so do please use email. As we won't be seeing each other in person, it is more important than ever to be signed up for our weekly email newsletter, the EUU. Check our Facebook page and the web page, our website, for notices and updates. The EUU will have a weekly lesson from our Religious Exploration Director, Neo, community announcements, meeting announcements, ways to help during these uncertain times, both with folks in the congregation as well as people in the greater community. We now have a subscription, as many of you know, to Zoom teleconferencing, and many of our groups are using Zoom to connect. Go to our website and check out our calendar online, and you will see that much is going on. Besides committees and groups continuing to meet using Zoom, we have a check-in for youth this afternoon, trainings on Zoom, and Thursday night sing-along with Deirdre. You can find out more about chalice groups that are starting, or you could say deep sharing circles. So do check out all that is going on. To schedule a Zoom conference, please email Jen, our operations officer, or operations manager, at M as in me, R, at firstunitarianottawa.ca. And if you are having trouble connecting with Zoom, please also email Jen, and we'll try and help you figure it out. Do you know you can call into a Zoom conference? You don't have to have a microphone on a computer or a camera. Find out how you can call in if going online was the barrier for you. We want to connect. Also, following the service today at 11:30, unless you're watching this at a different time, 11:30 a.m. on Sunday, today, we'll have a virtual coffee hour. Please do join us for the coffee hour. Information is in the EUU. May it just be physical distancing, not really social distancing during this time. May we remain connected by phone and through every device and means we know how through the electronic highway. May it be so. In thinking of Easter, as we light the chalice, I share these words from Reverend Sam Trombore. True or false are the wrong questions to ask of a story. Every story has a little of both. Buried or risen, hallucinated or seen, imagined or witnessed, both become half-remembered dreams over time. What speaks to us today are the messages carried in the stories. Messages of hope, messages of love, messages of freedom. Let us hear the message of this story, feel its encouragement, and use it to create the story of our lives. Others will tell of us. Let us sing the chalice song.
Chalice, chalice, burning bright, help remind us with your light of how we'd like to live each day with love and truth helping lead the way.
Now is the time in our service for a story for all ages. Spring is the time of growth, when up here in the north, the earth wakes up and shakes off the cold of winter. Trees bud, flowers bloom. It's a time of a new beginning. And so I'm going to read a special book to me. It's a book from my childhood. I've read her stories to you before. This is a book written by Joan Walsh England. I'm going to show you the cover. Do you see? Spring is a new beginning. It is a season of young life, of nesting birds and crocuses. Yellow is its color, the warm yellow of the sun. You can see it shining on me. Of the bright buttercup and the daffodil. Then all the world is leafy tipped and new. Then the earth is rich with seedlings. Then come delicious days of hunting wild strawberries, of picking violets and forget-me-nots, of sailing boats and dipping eggs. Have you dipped eggs for Easter? And finding hidden bunnies. This is the season of the tadpole. You know, they turn into frogs, right? This is the season of the tadpole and the duckling, of robin's eggs cupped in a soft bed of straw, of calves, yes, baby cows, trying out their wobbly legs, and of the fawns, yes, the baby deer, first brown-eyed, looking at spring. Then new life presses out from every growing thing, fulfilling our trust, renewing our faith that this is how it's always been, that this will be again. Spring brings an end to winter and a fresh new beginning. It is a gentle farewell to yesterday and the birth of new hope. I'll read that again. Spring is a gentle farewell to yesterday and the birth of new hope. Now let us sing our first hymn, number 61, with words from a Unitarian poet, Samuel Longfellow. Let's sing, "Lo, the earth awakes again." This is the time of the service when we are drawn closer to the heart of love at our center. May we hold in our hearts all those who have suffered loss and sickness during this time of coronavirus, those who are feeling fear and anxiety and loneliness, those who are most vulnerable during these times. Let us hold all in need in our hearts and minds. May all in need experience compassion, grace and mercy, food and shelter. In the words of Reverend Gary Kowalski, fill us then with reverence and compassion for all who are our kin, cloud and sun, sibling and cousin, the multitude of beings who share this improbable and never to be repeated moment. Today I place stones in the water that some of you have asked me to place for those you are thinking of, whether it be joys or concerns. I learned just after the service on Sunday that our Jody McIntosh had an emergency appendectomy surgery last week, and has been recovering at home. Prayers and virtual support are welcome. If you know Jody, do give her a call and check in. This is a stone for Jody. This is a stone for those who are truly locked in and have little contact with the world. A big stone for today, and it's hard to believe, is the 1-year anniversary of Marjorie Dashiell's death a year ago. For Marjorie and her loving family. And 4 stones. These are 4 stones of joy. A family of 3 is now a family of 4. Congratulations to the parents, Amy and Sean, big sister Mila, and baby Evan, who was born last Monday. It's nice to end on a note of joy. May we hold all these joys and sorrows of this gathered community and the greater world in our hearts. Let us join together in a moment of silence. Let us be still together. Words adapted from the Reverend Evan Carville Zemer. If we lived in another climate, our souls might speak other languages. We might speak oasis, or permafrost, or dry season or monsoon. But our souls speak spring. Our souls speak green shoots pushing through last year's leaves. Our souls speak flower buds stretching to sun. Our souls speak mud puddle and nest building, damp earth and worm castings, tiny green leaves and frog choruses. We speak spring because spring sings in us. We gather to nurture our faith in our growing, our own courage to push through, our own blossoming in beauty, our own small part in the spring of this world. When I was serving my little congregation in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, I remember sitting in my office just before an Easter Sunday when I was to preach, and the phone rang. It was from a congregant who said something like, "So it's Easter Sunday. What are you talking about?" And I just had to laugh. I mean, only in a Unitarian congregation would you ask the minister, "What are you going to talk about on Easter?" So I answered, "I am actually going to talk about resurrection." Can you believe it? It's the first time I've ever preached on resurrection on Easter Sunday. We both laughed. As you can imagine, resurrection is a challenging topic for a Unitarian Universalist minister to preach about. So many of us just don't want to entertain this notion that Jesus physically rose from the dead on the 3rd day after his horrible death by crucifixion. It seems like an incredible supernatural tale. Or the whole atonement theology, right? that Jesus's father, that guy named God, that Jesus's father planned all the suffering for his only son ahead of time for one reason or another. It doesn't seem reasonable or logical. UU minister Davidson Lohr notes, no matter how we sugarcoat it, the Easter stories are harder for most of us to give a fair hearing. To than myths from a dozen other religions that aren't so familiar. It's easier for us to hear stories about how the earth rests on the back of an elephant, which rests on the back of a giant tortoise, which rests on an infinite line of tortoises all the way down, because we know they don't really mean it literally. This idea of taking biblical stories literally reminds me of an experience I had with a meeting with a group of ministers. Now, this is going to sound like the beginning of a joke, right? But it's true. I mean, I could say there was in a room an Episcopalian, a Methodist, right? But there were Episcopalians, Methodists, Presbyterians, I think our Lone Baptist, United Church of Christ ministers, and me, the lone UU. And this very deeply faithful young Methodist minister was leading us in a devotional which included some conversation, right? He was telling a story and asked the question, does it matter what you believe? Oh, I know what it was. Does it matter whether you believe that Jesus was actually raised from the dead and rose to heaven? And in retrospect, I'm pretty sure that what he expected is that we would all give a resounding yes, and that he would move on with whatever point he was going to make. But not in this room. Instead of all of us saying, oh yes, it matters whether or not Jesus literally rose from the dead and went to heaven, we had a most fascinating conversation about the Bible as metaphor and the meaning of the stories being more important than historical facts. And the young minister just shook his head and rolled his eyes and realized he had absolutely lost control of the meeting. We all were having a great time debating and playing with the topic. Were they facts? Was what was said in the Bible historically true or not? What a fascinating conversation. And this underscores the point that Christian views on resurrection are not monolithic. There are many interpretations among theologians, clergy, individual believers. If you will, there are different ways of interpreting Scripture. Some do take everything fairly literally. In the words again of Davidson Lohr, as though these were stories about elephants and turtles, or a dead man who came back to life and walked with his friends who couldn't recognize a man they'd just seen 3 days before, right? As the young minister felt, it mattered that we would all believe that historically Jesus had risen from the dead. That one should accept these things on faith. Others understand, however, that biblical stories are written in the language of poetry. They're symbols, they're pointers to something else, they're metaphors. Stories used to open the door of understanding the here and now, opening those doors deeper and wider, perhaps even to create change and transformation in the reader. Reverend Francis Manley asks, where is the story in me or in you? So I ask, where is the Easter story in you? Rather than listening to the accounts of the Bible as if they were proof statements to be verified or falsified, what happens in me or in you when we envision what life would have been like in that place and time? To be an impoverished, hard, laboring people, ruled by an outrageously wealthy and controlling foreign superpower, a people longing for liberation from their difficult and dreary lives. Enter in a gentle and wise but steadfast prophet and teacher who begins to gather a following. He begins to bring them hope. And the people wonder, could this be the one we have longed for? The liberator? The leader who will win back our nation for us? And then this peaceful, loving man is unjustly convicted, brutalized, nailed to a cross to die like so many others by the rulers who you don't even want in your country. All hope is lost. As a UU child growing up, I found the Easter stories horrifying. The graphic images of a man being pierced by Roman guards, being mocked, a crown of thorns, nails in his hands and other limbs left dangling on a wooden cross, just unbearable. I think of a children's hymn, or we had this red children's hymnal in our Unitarian chapel in my congregation, an old Unitarian book. And I remember there was a stark folk hymn in it called The Lonesome Valley. Are you familiar with that? You must walk that lonesome valley. You got to walk it by yourself. Oh, nobody else can walk it for you. You must walk it by yourself. Jesus walked this lonesome valley. He had to walk it by himself. Oh, nobody else could walk it for him. He had to walk it by himself. So bleak. The Easter story weighed on me. While kids in other churches were taught that there was a happy ending, that this all was their ticket to heaven, in my upbringing, it was implied that there was no resurrection. How silly and illogical was that notion. And then Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, and Watergate in the U.S. happened, and so on. Clearly the world was broken. There was injustice, and one shouldn't set one's heart on hokey, happy endings. But you know what? Sometimes there are hokey, happy endings, or you could say pleasant surprises. We walk this sometimes lonely valley of life. We fall time and again and are able to rise again. Even after loved ones die, after our hearts have been broken, after divorce, after we have been victimized or betrayed, after we have lost our jobs, our home, our money, our friends, time and time again, we walk the dreary, lonesome valley until one day we lift our heads up to find that we have finally made it out. We rise again, and sometimes we are even transformed. Sometimes we even come out stronger, wiser, more loving, more resilient. Our hearts somehow do have room for more. Reverend Sam Trumbour suggests the resurrection teaches that even the worst experiences of living can have within them the seeds of new, more abundant life. UU minister Reverend Daniel Budd, in an attempt to explain Easter, says in part, "We're not sure what happened, but we know what it's like when someone has grown profoundly into our own lives, who seems as much a part of our living as our own breathing, whose presence lives in our souls. We know what it's like when death takes them from us, perhaps prematurely, and the empty place in our souls is much like an empty tomb. We're not sure what happened, but we know what it's like to feel sorrow and loss, despair and grief. We know the waves of tears and the thoughts of the past which flow through us, which begin to fill the emptiness with stories and memories, begin to shore us up again and shore us up again with a different presence which will live with us for all our lives. We're not sure what happened, but we know what it's like to realize, to have it dawn upon us that what we have known and loved lives on now with and within us, a part of who we are. We know that somehow in our hearts and souls, resurrection is real. Not that of the body, but of the spirit, a spirit renewed, even reborn. In the midst, our lives are living. We're not sure what happened, but we know that there is a difficult hope. There is a difficult hope that we all know about. A difficult hope in this imperfect life. Death looms over us, waiting for us and our loved ones, but we know in the end it isn't simply a tomb. Love lives beyond death. After the Easter story, after the death of their leader, the disciples rise again. And what? They start nothing less than a global religious movement. From the Reverend Victoria Safford. Is it safe, I wonder, to presume that we have all seen the dead resurrected? Can we presume, just quietly among us, this basic fact? Can we admit, however carefully at first, however foolish it may sound, that once or twice in our lives, or perhaps over and tumbling over, we have seen events miraculous? Choose the words you will, whatever you want. If miracle kind of cloys, try unexpected, surprising, unanticipated, lucky. That which has been given us, that second chance, that second wind, by the grace of God knows what. The dead shall rise again, she says. We know because we've seen it. She continues. We have known despair, some of us, and deep discouragement, some of us, and discord of the mind and heart, or disasters in the body or the spirit, or in both. We have known dead hope, dead courage, dead caring, dead will, dead faith, dead vision, dead power, deep winter. And we have felt, perhaps when we least expected to feel anything at all, our own slow blood stir in the vein like maple sap, and something very small and tight within begin to swell and open up, urgent, imperceptible at first, then undeniable. Love lives again where the dead has been. The Easter story needn't only be about the transformation of Jesus, but what about the story brings a transformation within me, within you? Reminds us that the crocus, let's say, will burst through the winter soil. We will be able to rise again like the crocus, rise again in our own lives. There are moments that arise all through our lives when something within us is called out, called forth, called to be our truest selves, called to a deeper understanding of the world. Those were words of Reverend Kathleen McTeague. She continues, today in the bright opening of the earth, in this turning season, when new life is pouring out all around us, what will we bring forth from within ourselves? She says we are a troubled tribe, yes, we human beings. The unfolding story of our time on earth is one clouded with pain and cruelty, with missed chances, unthinkable heedlessness and indifference, as well as all the bright notes of decency, kindness, freedom, and courage. But the message of our faith is this: we get to have a part of the story, of how the story unfolds. What we bring forth within ourselves changes the whole mix. How we vote, when and how we march or protest, whether we teach or feed or heal or help someone. We also have an impact through the selves we carry into all of these actions. Who we are matters just as much as what we do. Who we are, what we let ourselves bring forth. What do we want to bring forth? What do we want to bring forth together? What power, what vision, what courage do we want to bring forth? What compassion, what generosity, insight, and wisdom do we want to bring forth? That's what Kathleen McTeague asks today. We often think of the resurrection as a one-time event in history, but perhaps we might think of it as a promise that each year new life and love will rise again. Some of us may reject resurrection as an historical event, but perhaps we might think of it as this part of the story, think of this part of the Easter story as an invitation to roll away the stone which holds each of us inside our own tomb. Easter invites us, spring invites us to come out again, to rise again. Perhaps we could even say that resurrection is real, represented in the cycle of the seasons. It's true, for we witness it over and over again in our own lives and in the lives of others. Reverend Kathy Harrington suggests that we might think of Easter not as a noun, but as a verb. It's a verb meaning, she says, to awaken after being in the dark, to come alive when you never thought it could happen to you, to feel the warmth of love in a heart you were certain had cooled forever. It's a verb meaning you find hope and passion to replace just suffering and surviving, and the amazing transformation of spirit that comes from realizing once more what a magnificent and sacred gift your life is. I believe there's a reading in our hymnal by Unitarian poet and memoirist, writer May Sarton, that begins with this phrase, "Come out of the dark earth. Arise, arise, I say to you," that's me. "Come out of the dark earth, roll back the sun, come out into the warmth of the sun. Arise, arise, refreshed, renewed after a winter that was too long and dreary. Let us reach out, stretch out, offer our limbs to respond to the moment. Call each other, Zoom each other, make connections, take a walk, enjoy the rising earth. Even in these strange times, we find ourselves beckoned by spring and the hope of new beginnings. These times, I dare say, are stirring a change in us, a deeper introspection. What can we bring forth? Arise and let yourself, Let ourselves rise through the heaviness of the world and bud and fruit and flower in this season. May it be so. This is the time in our service that we usually accept the offering. You may go to our website or contact our finance manager to find out how you might keep up your pledge or make a donation during these times. We give these gifts freely. We receive these gifts gratefully. We dedicate these gifts to the work of our congregation, serving human wholeness, caring for our planet, upholding religious freedom, welcoming the stranger, loving one another. Let us sing hymn number 270, O Day of Light and Gladness, which lifts up both the Easter song of gladness and the Passover song of praise. Let's sing.
O day of light and gladness, of prophecy and song, what thoughts within us waken, what hallowed memories throng. The soul's arise and widens, past, present, future blend, and rises on our vision, the life that has no end. Earth feels the season's joyance, from mountain range to sea. The tides of life are flowing, fresh, manifold, and free. In valley and on upland, by forest never dim, all nature lives in chorus, the resurrection hymn. O dawn of life eternal, to thee our hearts upraise. The Easter song of gladness, the Passover of praise. Thine are the many mansions, thy dead die not to live, who fillest from thy fullness time and eternity.
As we extinguish the chalice, words from the Reverend Dr. Richard Gilbert. A tomb is no place to stay, be it a cave in the Judean hills or the dark cavern of the spirit. A tomb is no place to stay. When fresh grass rolls away the stone of winter cold, and valiant flowers burst their way to warmth and light, a tomb is no place to stay. When each morning announces our reprieve, and we know we are granted yet another day of living, a tomb is no place to stay. When life laughs a welcome to hearts that have been away too long, Let us sing Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Cool vidas quari de justitia, tenurimur cielum potuum, source de vie, viens vers moi, viens vers moi.
Go in joy, go in peace, go in love. Happy Easter, and be well.